if you choose to live this life as a learner, then you always get to evolve. But if you try to show up haughty and proud and like, I've got this, then you actually never invite new wisdom. And I just don't like to roll like that.
We all want our stories to matter, to move people, to build something that lasts. And you know deep down that the experiences that nearly broke you are the very ones that could set someone else free. But you feel stuck because the weight of what you've been through, the trauma, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, well, it keeps whispering that you're not enough to step into the spotlight and own your message. Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I'm so delighted that you're here because today's guest is Rachel McCord, founder of the McCord List Media Network, host of McCord List Today, and author of You Can't Heal Your Life, But I Know a Guy. Rachel survived open-heart surgery at 32, childhood trauma, PTSD, and suicidal depression, and turned it all into a Hollywood media empire. You'll discover how to get radically honest about your story, how to starve fear and feed faith, and how to finally do what you're here for. So glad you're with us today. Hello, Rachel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm super pumped to be here.
So the McCord List, what is that?
What is that? Well, I mean, you are the king of it. You got your genie telling you, but I'm gonna give a little sneak peek. So, I started
Please.
McCord List after selling my first company at 24 years old. I had been in the event space, opened a few venues, really helped companies scale and open more locations, and I had done all the things that quote unquote made sense in my business. But when I moved to Hollywood and my sister and a lot of my family being in the entertainment industry, I just started having like this aching for more. And I wanted to be a voice of love and light in the world. So we started the McCord List in 2013, which like is so crazy. It's been so long now. And the vision was, how can I help make an impact in the world? How can I be a message of inspiration? How can I bring love and light into the influential community that I had access to, right? The people that I knew very well, being in the Hollywood circles, you're kind of always going to events and you can live a pretty superficial, shallow life if you're not careful. And that's what I was really feeling like I was experiencing. A lot of my friends were experiencing. So we got really intentional about building community. And then from there, I turned it into a media network. So now I produce 19 other shows and I produce my own talk show as well. We have it on network television. We have a platform on Roku, Apple TV, Samsung, and Amazon.
And for our listeners, what does that mean?
What does that
What?
mean? So
Yeah.
the same way that you might watch on Netflix, we have our version of Netflix. It's called the McCord List TV. So the same places that you go to watch your streaming, if you're downloading a new app, updating your app, you can actually watch all of our inspirational content with all of our show hosts and conversations with people on the McCord List Today, which is my talk show that airs daily on networks at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's like the traditional route. And then we just stream it and syndicate it everywhere we can. We took the Oprah model where it's like, hey, create the best show you can and put it everywhere. And I think to your point about storytelling, us being able to sit down with people, hear their stories, help them really bring it to life in media. You just get the coolest messages. I feel like every day I film, I walk home I'm like walking to my car to go home and I'm like, oh my goodness, how is this my life? I feel so grateful.
And today we're going to really explore that idea around, as you say, don't ever waste a heartbeat. You're here on this planet for a reason. You have a story to tell, certainly, but even more than that, you have an impact to make, and you need that story told properly in order for you to make that impact. So let's just talk a little bit about your backstory. Did you really grow up in a trailer park in Georgia?
I really did. The news is correct. Multiple trailer parks, actually. And my husband likes to point that out for whatever reason I don't know.
He
But
doesn't hold
yeah,
that against you.
yeah, right. I remember the time I was first introducing him to my sister, and I was pretty much solid on never telling him where I had grown up because I was unfortunately ashamed of it. I felt like I was kind of less than, to be honest. I feel like there's almost like this stereotype in your mind of what it means to grow up in a place like that. Now I'm like, I'm so grateful. I love where I grew up. I love that I went through a lot of adversity, trauma, and drama, and all the things because it's made me who I am today. But I definitely struggled with self worth. I remember someone coming over to my house one time and just like turning up her nose. It was like a specific vibe. And I remember being a kid and was almost like that imprinted in my heart, like, oh, I wasn't enough. I didn't fit in because I didn't have the country club membership. I didn't have the big house. But I had moved 33 times by the time I was 16 years old. So I lived in many, many houses and a lot of them were mobile.
And you went for that. How did you find yourself then in New York on the big jumbotron in Times Square, and then sharing the stage with the folks of Michelle, like or the likes of Michelle Obama, Tyra Banks, Dr. Phil? I mean, what was that journey?
Wow. Well, it was a long, wild, winding journey. And I think the best way to describe it for the people who are on or in the middle of a journey similar to mine is that I was always anchored into what my husband would call the quit speech. It was so hard, to be honest, trying to level yourself up. I think the biggest challenge, if you go on the journey of trying to move from where you are to where you want to be, whether that's a journey of success in the like stereotypical society standards, if it's an emotional journey, if it's a spiritual journey, whatever it is, you have to be committed to shedding layers. And the reality is that's a difficult process. So when I look at it from a storytelling perspective, everybody wants to have that jumbotron moment in Times Square if you're in media, right? It's like the epitome of I was filming a show for Bloomberg Television at NASDAQ, and it's the epitome of someone just stamping and saying, "Oh, like she's good enough. She's got it going on." But I think that journey actually always starts within first because it's so easy to feel unworthy when you've come from a background and a story within your own heart that says you're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. You're trailer trash. You're not like this. You're like all these lies and these belief systems become these glasses and these lenses that we live our lives out of. So for me, it was very expensive because I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapy. I read over 1,000 self help books. I worked my butt off. I remember getting my first job after I started working when I was 13 years old, and my boss couldn't afford me to work like the whole day, but I was struggling with a lot of depression. So genuinely, I didn't want to go home. So I'd be like, "It's cool. I'll clock out, do my homework and schoolwork because I was homeschooled, and then let me just work until you close." So I would work like 13, 14-hour days every day. And after doing that for many years, at 16, I was managing the place. By 18, they offered me my own location because we had already opened a second location while I was with them.
What was the job?
It was in the restaurant industry, like literally it started in a little pizzeria that it turned into this multi-restaurant Italian restaurant franchise. And I started building all of the standard operating procedures and all the guides and the training docs because I was training everyone because I was the only employee that lasted because people don't stay in restaurant jobs, right? They come when they're on holiday break in college. And so for 2 weeks, I'm busting my butt to train someone and then they're gone. And I'm like, what are we doing here? So I remember just always kind of doing the things that made sense efficiently, right? It made sense efficiently to shift and to be more organized. But then when I left that job, I was hired at the largest PEO in the world called ADP. And I was
Now
on a
wait a second.
camp.
Whoa, let's cut through the acronyms there. A PEO.
Yeah, so it's a professional employer organization.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you've seen ADP, the little red logo on
Yeah,
some paycheck across some job somewhere.
absolutely. I just didn't know what PEO was. Okay, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
I like it. Thanks for stopping it. So yeah, I was on this campus and there were 2,500 people there. And from a girl who had kind of grinded her way from a pizzeria into it was just weird. And I was very overwhelmed. I was having panic attacks, actually, to be honest with you. And I remember those were the seasons of my life, right, where I was shedding skin. I was having to learn how to find comfort in very uncomfortable places because our brains don't really want to stretch that far, generally, right? Like you typically have the same thoughts today as you did yesterday. And it's about 14,000 of the same thoughts. So if you really think about it, there's such a need, there's such an energy suck and energy burn from your brain when you're learning to be something more. You're learning to do something more. And so I feel that for most people, if you're stuck in a place and you're trying to get to the next spot, you're going to face three main things pretty much always out of the gate. One is the imposter syndrome, right? Where you feel, oh my goodness, like I do not belong. Who let me in? I don't, this is not, I'm not that girl or guy. The second,
Do you still suffer from
of
that with all the
course,
success that you've had?
of course, I find myself feeling that all the time. I think for me, what really changed the game, I had a very pivotal, like, spiritual encounter in 2018 that shifted my whole landscape.
Can you
And
tell us about that?
yeah, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. So basically, how do I phrase this? So I had struggled a lot with the unknown of my story. And what I mean by that is sometimes if you encounter severe trauma, like PTSD level trauma, you can block things out that are just too much in your mind. Like your body almost says, you're not strong enough for what this story really will do to you. So it's a black hole almost in your mind. So for me, prior to the age of 12, 13, I couldn't remember majority of my childhood. It was all a very big, just black blob. I had a couple specific memories, but that was it. And, it was a really unbelievable series of events. I call them mini miracles that got me in a room with someone for a totally different reason, where I found out that she actually was a therapist who does EMDR. So, can you imagine? You and I are sitting here to do a meeting like this, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute. There's something going on that the only reason I even knew it was going on is because I literally in my head 2 days before heard myself say, Your sister remembers this happening to you guys." So, backstory, my sister had been facing a lot of, memories that I didn't know about because we weren't talking at the time. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and my sister's an actress. There's always drama with the McCord sisters, unfortunately. We have our ups and downs, so I wasn't talking to her at the time, but my oldest sister had called me and said she was struggling, and as soon as my sister said that, I literally in my head heard, "She remembers this happening to you guys," and it shook me because I was like, "What?" I mean, this is a girl who doesn't remember all these things,
Yeah.
doesn't know what's going on. Like, "What are you talking about?"
And you're
So,
talking about child abuse here?
yes,
Going through some really horrible stuff? I'm sorry
yes,
about that, yeah.
yes. Thank you. Um, but it was wild because I found out my sister had been doing EMDR, and then 2
And
days
that is
later,
what? EMDR?
it's basically I don't wanna mess up, it's like rapid eye movement. I don't wanna butcher what the acronym means, but it's basically this therapy style that activates both sides of your brain. You can activate it through tapping, rapid eye movement, or they have these little buzzers you use. And it basically helps you to keep by tapping both sides of your body or activating both sides of your body. It keeps your emotional body from stopping you.
I've got it here, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Thank you. You are
There we
on
go.
it. Dude, this is not your first rodeo.
Yeah, I'm not like Rogan who has a dude off to the side that pulls all this stuff up. I just gotta do it on the fly. Anyways, keep going.
I love it. So here I am in this room for one reason. It turns into something totally different. And I literally had an out of body experience, is the best way I can describe it. My memories started coming back to me in a very delicate, beautiful way. I had a total God encounter, to be honest with you. And in the same moment that I was remembering all of these memories that I had these like fragmented like pictures from my childhood, but I didn't know the whole surrounding situation. They started to play out like a movie in my mind, and I remembered everything. I could remember I remember what car we drove, which I know for some people is probably totally normal. For me, I had no idea. Like, if you'd asked me 2 days before, I would have never known. So it was almost like this delicate way of reminding me of what happened, which became this missing jigsaw puzzle piece for a girl who had clawed at her healing for so long. And I think what was a blessing for me was by 2018, think about it. I had started my second company 5 years before. I was really grinding. I was running the education for the largest PE. I'm sorry, I'm going back to the old school. The largest fashion trade show in the world called Magic. We do these huge events with 1 million square feet of fashion and beauty brands, and it pops up in Vegas and New York and all over. So I'm running all of this stuff. So from a business perspective, on the outside, I look like I'm at the top of my game. But here I am walking through life with a limp because I was struggling to connect the dots between how I felt and what I was living. And suddenly I'm in this room and this puzzle piece connects everything. It makes sense why I was struggling with so many different things. And that's where I think that what you're doing is so beautiful in your world, because storytelling really is so important, right? It's so important, like you say, the story we tell ourselves. It's so important what we understand about ourselves because it's all data, right? Like I had lived in fear for so long, but once I had the answers, it actually fueled me and empowered me and gave me the ability to actually move past it. And I walked out of that session not heavy and burdened by what had happened for me. And that's why I could connect it to the spiritual encounter, these visions I started having, and then just this unbelievable experience. And by the way, this is not an ayahuasca trip where I'm like, ooh, floaty, like eating like Fruity Loops. Like I was literally just in the room, like a very sterile environment, totally not prepared for this. And I really felt like God had made me a new creation that day, to be honest with you.
And how old were you when you did that?
This was 2018, so I was like in my mid 20s.
Hey, we're going to be right back with Rachel and the rest of her story. But she had mentioned how important storytelling is in all of our lives. And so I thought this would be a good time for you to hear from some of the people that have been impacted by our story cycle genie and how it has helped them craft clear, concise, compelling stories so that they can really make the impact in the world they want to make with their brands.
Oh, I was so impressed, Park. I couldn't believe how robust it was. First of all, I didn't realize I was going to get such a wonderful, thoughtful breakdown. And that was my first thought was, wow, this was all done using sort of this is, as you call it, artful intelligence, and really just looking at the whole picture of what my brand and my story is, and what does that mean for the services I'm trying to provide, and how can I position myself well? That's what really struck me, was it didn't just tell me, oh, you've got this score because your tagline's great, but it talked about how you can take that information and use it to your advantage as a business. And I thought that was so priceless, really, that's something that everybody needs to take a step back and consider. And your tool's certainly a great way of doing that.
What you just sent me, you would have probably spent maybe $15,000, $20,000, and it probably would have taken 6 weeks. You would have had to go through focus groups and surveys and then go back to the team, then come back out, go back, come back. By just reading that, it made me feel like you got me.
It was spookily accurate. There were a lot of areas I thought, oh, this is, what is the value proposition evaluation, for instance? Something that also jumped out at me, which I loved, which was the brand archetype assessment. The sage, the magician, the caregiver. These are great takeaways. I love it.
I really, really liked it. It's always nice to see the things that you're doing well, but I really appreciated the strategic enhancement opportunities, those places that I could actually tweak things to just work just a little bit better. It said long-term branding versus short-term tactics were an issue with, my brand. I immediately recognized the truth of that. I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. I'm too involved in the moment, in the day-to-day sometimes to do that higher level strategic thinking. So that was a gift to me. I really appreciated it.
If you're ready to test drive the Story Cycle Genie and begin refining and defining your brand story, head on over to storycyclegenie.ai. And there actually at the top of the page is a red button called the Free Brand Story Grader. That's right. All you do is click on that, give it your name, your email address, and the URL of the brand that you want to test. And it's going to give you a grade from A+ to F-, heaven forbid, and a 14-point storytelling assessment that's going to validate what you're doing well, like you heard from some of our users. It's going to reveal some gaps apps like some of them talked about that you can fix quickly. And guess what? It's even going to inspire you with new ways to think about your brand story, and it is completely free. Just go over to StoryCycleGenie.ai, click on our brand story grader, and have at it. Now, let's get back to Rachel and the rest of her story. So mid-20s, so you had a lot happen in your life leading up to that, and you had jobs when you were 13, and you said started your own company at 16. Were you a big Christian, God believer leading up to that, or was it just kind of an epiphany that hit you?
That's a great question. So I grew up in a home that would have been called Christian, but one of the most abusive people in my life was a pastor. So
Mm.
I had this bizarre connection where I knew that God was real, but I had never seen God be real to me. I had not known him truly. I always was like, yeah, I know you're really powerful and I know you made the heavens and the earth, but you can hang out over there. I'm doing things, I'm like in my life. I don't want to be like living a certain way. I was just kind of doing my life. And then moved to Hollywood at 19 and, started just doing all the things. And it wasn't like my faith or my religion was ever a thing. But what happened that was really shocking, exactly 2 months before this encounter, I was invited by the country of Israel to come out and bring awareness to their exports. So, what you might not know is that Israel, because it's so small, actually, most of their economy is based on what they can export to the world. So, they need influential creators to talk about what they have, their beauty products and things like that. And because I had built not only my own brand in the creator space, but also a network that we now have built to over 1 million vetted creators who we collaborate with on big campaigns. I was invited out and it was so cool. I mean, I never even thought of going. I thought it was super cool, of course, because I knew the stories and whatnot. But that was honestly the beginning of everything changing because I was on this very normal business trip, right? But they take you to Jerusalem because everybody wants to go to Jerusalem if you go to Israel, because wherever your faith is, you can find a space for yourself. So they're walking us through and they're like, oh, and this is interesting. It was funny because our tour guide was Jewish, but they knew I was Christian. So I think I was like the only person who would technically be like, oh, yeah, I was Christian. Now, I think that what I learned in the past few years is that I was a very different version of a Christian. Like today, I really feel like I've embodied like what it means for me to live a life where I really like aspire to be as like Christ-like as I possibly can. So it's very different than where I was in that stage. But I was like, yeah, I'm a Christian. Like I would call myself that, right? So they're kind of walking us through like, oh, and this is this. And it was so wild because someone was filming me as I was in this church. It's like the holy church that you can see where they buried Jesus and where he was crucified. And it's really wild. You see me like, oh my goodness, wow, it's so beautiful. This is amazing. And then the tour guide literally says, yep. And so we'll just come on up here. So I start walking. He goes, this is this is the journey that Jesus took when he was about to go get crucified. You can literally hear my voice go, and I was like, my whole demeanor changed. I was like, wait, this is it? And it was so crazy because I actually think that was the beginning of everything changing. Because at the end of that walkthrough, after seeing the cross, and I was getting moved and rocked, and I was feeling things I couldn't describe. At the end of it, there's the marble where they wrapped his body after he died. And I remember just laying my chest on it and begging God to heal my heart because here I was living these two lives, like this successful life where people are taking notice of my accolades. I'm building a huge following, I'm building a huge community. And at the same time, my heart was so broken. I was extremely suicidal. I was majorly depressed. I was fighting PTSD. I had checked myself into treatment my first year of marriage to my husband, newlywed mode. I was in a completely different space and I was so good at faking a smile. But the moment that they said, this is where he walked, it was like, oh my gosh, like it was so weird. I was there, but I wasn't there. I wasn't prepared. And suddenly I was fully there. And it was like my whole body was present. My heart was present. And I didn't even know how broken my heart was physically while I was asking God to heal it because I knew it was broken spiritually and emotionally. But there was so much more to uncover.
And that was after you had done the EMDR treatment?
This was
Or that
exactly
was
2 months
before?
before.
2 months before. So you had that experience in Jerusalem and then came back and still kind of a mess, it sounds like. And
Definitely.
you still had to figure out, what was happening inside of you. So, all right, let me pump the brakes here a second because you have really an amazing story. And now let's just recap because I've got the one that leading up to a question here. So, grew up in Georgia, several different trailer parks. You experienced you and your sister some abuse growing up, and of course that's going to shut a lot of people down. You're working as a 13-year-old. Most people don't do that unless they're babysitting or mowing lawns. In my case, and you're taking on more responsibility there. You launch your own brand company. 16. When did you feel like you got the big break from little Rachel out of Georgia to now this whole world of Israel and New York and Hollywood starts opening up to you? Can you take us to a moment when that big break happened and everything pivoted in your life?
Yes, what a great question. Wow. So it was interesting because I was living in Hollywood, and when I first moved to Hollywood, I was in the environment we were in. My sister was on like the top of her game from an actress perspective. She had done Nip Tuck and had built a little bit of a following, but then she was the lead in 90210 for 5 years. So she was like Naomi Clark. Everybody knew her. She was on every bus and elevator and all the things from a marketing perspective. And so I went into Hollywood being swarmed by paparazzi. They were stalking our house. They were always all around us. I remember one event, there was like 100 who swarmed our car, and I got so freaked out. I tried to help my sister get out of it, but she was like totally fine. She was like chilling, doing photos. And I was like, all right, well, you're on your own because I got to get out of here. So I had been in that environment as the plus one, right? My joke was like, I'm celebrity adjacent. My sister's a celebrity, whatever. It was really weird when people started to recognize me and people started to invite me to things. And I remember just literally being at this, I think, it was the Grove. That's so funny. Yeah, I was in the Grove in Los Angeles, which is this really cool outdoor mall that's designed by the team, I think, who did like the Win in Las Vegas. And they teamed up with like the whole Disney vibe. So it's very cool. Anyway, I'm there and I saw a paparazzi person and they were snapping photos, and I just kind of like looked around like, oh, like, I mean, even though you live in LA, it's still cool. Like, oh, who's here? Like, is Chris Hemingway? You're like, oh, who is that? And then it was like just me. And that was really weird. That was literally like, oh my gosh.
And,
Like,
and had you been on TV, how did they know about you other than you were celebrity adjacent to your sister?
well, it was wild because, when we started the McCord list in 2013, we really, and I wrote a book about breaking into entertainment and social media without it breaking you. And I gave the actual tips that I did as I was building this career. We were bootstrapping it, to be honest. Like, I would call the paparazzi and like book myself. I would like talk about it embarrassingly, but it's true. I mean, I always looked at it like, I'm building a brand and this is marketing. I need to market myself as the product and build the community around myself, because if I have a community of influential people, I'm not relying on the fact that at the time I had 50,000 followers, right? I was like, I'm not relying on myself. I'm actually building a community. So I would host an event and invite 50 people who would have 10 million followers each. So we were just creating really big splashes in the environment. And we were a little ahead of the curve when it comes to influencer events, because my husband had pioneered the influencer marketing space back in '04. He had launched every movie from Twilight and Harry Potter to Chronicles of Narnia and Toy Story. So he was very involved in activating influential people on behalf of brands, but he started before social media was a thing, and he did it with blogs. Then MySpace came and he was like, whoa, this is huge. You can tap into people's communities. So he just knew what was up early on. So he really led the strategy on the McCord list early on. And then I was the work boots. I just kind of like tugged away at it. So I think I had my head down in the work so much that every time something would work, right, we would book this specific photographer and that would get into press. It was almost like a game for me because I was working 17-hour days and I was like grinding, grinding, grinding. And I was like, okay, I got to get cute, go to 5 different events. And then you're like, oh, that event got impressed. The other ones didn't. Why did that event get impressed? Who photographed that? What did they tag it as? So I started really studying the mechanics of the business of entertainment. And that's really what fuels my work now when I produce other people's shows, because I don't want people to just have a show as a vanity. I want them to build a business in entertainment if they're passionate about media and communications. So I'm looking at it like really like detailed. Like I love spreadsheets and looking at data and analyzing what is working, what happened here. Because for me, metrics don't lie, right? Like if I ask my team, if I say, how's everything going? Everyone's going to, oh, it's great. We had some bumps. Everything's cool. But if I say, hey, how many posts on social media did we do this week on behalf of our shows? How many show hosts launched their shows this week? Things like that, you start to get really specific on. So, here I was in this space in Hollywood where I was really doing it like I did the pizzeria. I wasn't doing it like in Hollywood. Granted, it was a glamorous life and I was doing all these things people cared about, but I didn't really care about it because I actually didn't want to be famous. I was really freaked out and I would get really anxious and overwhelmed. So I was only doing it because to me it made sense because I really wanted to speak love and light into the world. I wanted to bring inspiration. I used to call the McCord list self-help with lipstick and high heels. And now I've written a book called You Can't Heal Your Life, which is hilarious. But I really just have always been very passionate about growth and helping people grow. And for me, in any environment, I'm just going to apply it to the principles of the space I'm in.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of your work, maybe all of it, has been around empowering women entrepreneurs to help find their voice, find their place, and tell their story. And as you mentioned, you've got this new book out, You Can't Heal Your Life, but I know a guy, as you say there. You've tried it all. When self-help fails, God prevails. So obviously playing off of the epiphany you've had, the experience in Jerusalem and so forth. And in the book, I believe you've got really three main things for people to think about. Was that thing number one, the imposter syndrome that we talked about before we dove a little bit deeper into your life? And if so, what's thing number two?
Great question. Yes, you're nailing the head. So the first part is all broken into getting real and honest about your life. Part of that, we talk about imposter syndrome. We talk about the self-doubt. We talk about the insecurities that you face. Also, maybe the areas of your life that need some healthy boundaries for yourself. Maybe there's some areas you've been irresponsible. So it's this cool section that's all about like, hey, come from a place of grace, but you'll never move from where you are to where you want to be if you aren't getting real with where you're at. I feel like there's almost this humbling moment where if you choose to live this life as a learner, then you always get to evolve. But if you try to show up haughty and proud and like, I've got this, then you actually never invite new wisdom. And I just don't like to roll like that. So then part two is starve fear, feed faith. I think that gets a lot of people tripped up. So if we're on the journey, and these three parts are really building to one specific thing, and that is for you to do what you're here for. Because I believe that in the hearts of every human being, there is a mission and a message and a purpose, and there's power in that. And we at the McCord List utilize storytelling to do that. We help people who are authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs get totally unstuck on the things that are holding them back. Most of the time, it's not an issue of having the wisdom because they wrote a book or they're about to. They're a coach. They're helping people do this. It's really about sitting in a major studio on a really cool studio lot where they film Star Wars and Avatar and all these things. And that person feeling like, I belong here. And I don't belong here because I'm amazing, which is kind of counterproductive, right? Most people in society, oh, you're so amazing. I believe everyone I know is amazing. I believe everyone I don't know is amazing. But I don't come from that perspective. I come from the perspective that right now, in this exact moment, while my heart is beating, there's a person sitting in the floor of their closet, possibly with a handful of pills, like I have had in the past, ready to give up. So who would I be as a person who has felt like God has literally grabbed me by the top of my shirt and pulled me out of the mire, pulled me out of devastation and darkness and depression and PTSD and all these things that were just my day to day. They were constantly weighing me down and holding me back from what I get to do now, which is fly and help other people fly. Who would I be if I just let that little girl in that closet be a part of my story? Why don't I be the girl who says, yes, I was in that closet and I see you in your closet and I can help you by just pointing you to the one who can actually change everything? Because I feel like that's where self-help fails. Self-help is very helpful, but it is not healful. I read 1,000 self-help books. I banged on the door of therapy. I was the most like religious returning customer you could imagine. And still, the brokenness in my heart was so loud that it wasn't until I survived open heart surgery and my heartbeat literally stopped for a 5-hour procedure that 1 in 5 people do not survive. It wasn't until that, the 2 weeks leading up to that, that I was like, dude, it's time. It's time to do what you're here for such a time as this, because I was not being bold about a faith I knew was real. I wasn't living from that. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do? I've got this crazy cool platform. I worked so hard, but I'm ready to walk away from all of it because I just want to go out there and find the people in the closet. Where are the people who are struggling? Where are they at? How can I help them heal? And so when you walk through these 3 parts of number 1, getting real about your life, it's not getting real from judgment, which is what the world would say. It's getting real with grace and understanding that there's a God who loves you as you are, no matter what. And then you move from that to starving fear and feeding faith. And the only way you get to true peace, in my opinion, is having faith. And I get that people come from totally different backgrounds in faith. Like, I'm not talking about religion because I get church hurt clearly if you hear my story. I'm talking about a relationship with a living, breathing God who wants to love you and encounter you and connect with you. And people come from different places, and that's beautiful because as long as you're pulling up the threads trying to find truth, you will absolutely land on faith. I believe it with all my heart and soul. So when you do that, you feel empowered when everything's falling apart, when the show doesn't work, when people laugh at you, when you embarrass yourself, when you flumble the words, when you mess it all up. It doesn't matter because you're actually looking up instead of looking out. I serve outwardly with my people and my peers, but I look up and I get what I need from above. And that brings me to my 3rd part of the book, which is do what you're here for. Like, my job in this life, I really believe with every heartbeat I have left, not only to serve my family and to love God with all my heart and soul and spirit, but it's to help people get unstuck. As they're on the journey, they're healing in any journey. Maybe they've had a normal quote unquote life, but lives and life is hard. And one time someone tells you do not cry as a kid could imprint on your heart and make you think, oh, I got to hold it all inside. And guess what? Our bodies are too big for emotions. That's why they're meant to be in motion. And I just don't believe that we can process this life without one who created us, because I'm not a tech girl, even though I've got really cool equipment in my studio. I'm not a tech girl. If I need to understand an invention, I go to the inventor, I go to the owner's manual, and I study it. And that's what I just encourage everyone to do. Like, wherever you are in life, like, I know you're feeding your body. I hope you're feeding your mind, but are you feeding your spirit? And that's what I'm here for.
Okay. And you have tremendous energy and inertia moving forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, all right, let's pump the brakes just a sec. Open heart surgery. What happened there?
So for 8 years, I was passing out. We almost diverted an airplane one time because I had an episode. We had doctors like rushing through the aisle to help me. Um, I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs by the end of it without stopping to rest.
And
I
how old were you?
This was going on up until I had the surgery in 2024. So I was, early 30s, 32.
Gosh, just a year and a half ago then,
Yep.
roughly. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I was banging on the door of my cardiologist and I kept getting echoes and, 2 minutes of an EKG that looked normal, but I had a severe heart murmur. And that was what clued us into the fact that I was dealing with mitral valve prolapse. But I had a very severe exercise-induced version. A lot of people have mitral valve prolapse, which basically just means your heart valve is like little saloon doors that are supposed to open and fully close. Mine did not fully close, so they'd kind of flap around. And in the process of that happening, when my blood would get the oxygen it needed and it would go to the rest of my body, specifically my most vital organ, my brain, it would actually fall back and it would flood my atrium. And I would experience shortness of breath and all of these like really weird fatigue and headlight. So, I mean, sometimes my blood pressure would go so low that I couldn't even keep my eyes open. I could be totally aware of what was going on in the room, but I couldn't even like.
And was this something that crept up on you? Like you didn't have it as a young lady, but you got it in your career at some point?
So it's a congenital condition because it's basically a defect with your heart. Your heart is literally broken. It has a
Mhm.
break. However, a lot of people have this and it doesn't manifest in this way. There's theories around, the severe trauma that I went through, maybe the stress of that, maybe the years and years of daily toxic stress that I pretty much lived in could have been, contributing to that. But then I was diagnosed with POTS, and POTS is a condition where if you stand up, your blood flow will kind of rush to your feet and you can black out. So unfortunately, they're almost like little besties. They like to help one another with all their symptoms. So
Gotcha.
I went into many doctors' offices and they would just be scratching their head like, "Well, this doesn't make sense." And I had one cardiologist, I went to a new one who my friend recommended, and he really took what I said seriously, and he said, "You might need heart surgery. Let's do an internal scope and let's really look at your heart from another angle because everything in your paperwork is saying mild to moderate mitral valve." But he put a stethoscope on my heart and he pulled his head back and raised his eyebrows and he's like, "Okay, that is not mild." He's like, "That's moderate at best. Let's look at this from another angle." Sure enough, when he went in to do what they call a TEE, they could see my heart from the inside because it goes down your throat. And looking at my heart from that angle, he could see that the reason they weren't seeing all of the regurgitation, which is basically that blood falling back, is because it was actually going around like a half moon and jetting all the way around my heart. So
Wow.
when my blood pressure would rise, like when I would exercise or when I was giving birth to my son, naturally I was passing out because it would flood my atrium. I couldn't breathe. It was just a whole situation. So it was one of those things where I was marching towards heart failure and didn't realize it. But I felt very trapped going into the surgery because I didn't want to do the surgery. Of course, who wants to undergo open heart surgery? It's not like, what I really want to do on a Tuesday? Like, this sounds fun. So I was really nervous, of course. And all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, I've got the tools because I've spent these wild years since 2018 having crazy, unbelievable, undeniable God encounters and experiences. Because what happened for me that August in 2018 in that EMDR session really just birthed what became my daily. Like what my daily is now, I feel, experience, hear God all the time. And I live like that. That's like, I crave that. That's like my dream. So when I was going through the heart surgery, I came to the most unbelievable peace. Genuinely, like they say, the peace that passes understanding. Because I was in this place where I knew that there was a chance I wouldn't survive this surgery, but I was totally at peace with where I was going. And, you're in the middle of really weird seasons, like being in your early 30s and having doctors ask you for your advanced directives of what you want to do in the case of this. And do you have a will? And all these things that maybe you don't usually have to think about until you're wiser in life. I really had to think about it like pretty quick. And, I think the 2 weeks before the surgery changed my life forever because I really felt like my time could be coming to a close. My son was 3 years old, and, I really started talking to people I trusted, like, "Hey, dude, look out for my boys, my husband and my son, like, look out for them if this is it for me?" And, it really rocked me. And I think that that's what I wanted to write from in the book. I felt like it poured out of me. In 30 days, I wrote 60,000 words, which is insane. Um, but I was in this space where I was like, I've got to meet the people in that moment that I was in when I was standing in Cedar Sinai and got the word that I failed my stress test and we were advancing towards surgery because kissing my son's face at 3 years old while he's sleeping and going to a hospital is an impossible journey, and I don't wish it on anybody, but the truth is a lot of us have that, and a lot of us have these storms and these fires and these broken hearts that aren't necessarily opened by a knife or for me, a robot, but they could be broken from the difficulties in this life. And when we try to bring that in this life and we don't stand on solid ground, it will really crush us. And I don't want that for anybody.
And so, yeah, just amazing. And it was really what spawned your new book, You Can't Heal Your Life. We have covered a lot of ground. Would you just very quickly recap those steps again for our listeners of what they're going to get from your book and what they can be thinking about right now in their own life and their own story?
Great question. So, number one, what to think about right now, I would say like digest this conversation. Did something pop out to you, right? Write it down. Maybe there are three things that spoke to your heart and your spirit. Like, don't let them push by. Life is very busy and can be very distracting. But if you take even 5 minutes just to feel and process, you might actually really come to a new feeling within your heart that gives you peace. And on that note, the three parts are to get real and honest about your life, to starve fear, feed faith, and to do what you're here for.
Starve fear and feed faith. I love that. That's great. Now, as we do, Rachel, with all of our guests, of course, I put your brand through the Story Cycle Genie, unbeknownst to you. Sent it over to you a couple days ago. It gave you a brand assessment, and then it actually created the brand narrative strategy. Now, because I don't know your brand intimately, of course, so I just said, okay, I think from what I can tell from her website and what the assessment says here, I think you're pretty darn accurate here, Jeannie. So let's go ahead and create the narrative strategy for Rachel as you are currently showing up in the world. What did you think of what you received?
I loved it. I think my favorite part was the fact that it graded it from a up to 10 points on all the different sections. And that was really helpful. It was also very enlightening because, when you build a brand, sometimes you're so in the middle of it that you lose context of the objective perspective. And I loved that I got to be the student in that environment and read this whole summary that you guys had done, which was incredible and totally captured me and gave me some food to thought on what to add to my website, what to potentially remove as things have evolved over the years. So it was very enlightening and I'm super grateful.
So, well, you're more than welcome. So let me ask you, where did it validate you? Where what you're already feeling like you're doing well, and you're like, yep, nailed it, because the genie recognized what you're trying to do. Where were some of those spots in it?
Okay, great question. I think my favorite part was that it really got the heartbeat of the brand. Since we started the McCord list, I really wanted to make sure that it was very clear that we aren't just helping create these really cool experiences. We aren't just creating cool content. We aren't just doing fun things in media. We're actually about truly empowering others. And I love that the genie caught that because for me, that's kind of the most important part.
All right, then gaps. It reveals gaps in your story, like, oh, it didn't talk about this, or it missed that, or whatever. Or maybe it spoke about this in the wrong way, which may also mean it's not accurately portrayed on your website. What were some of the gaps that or maybe one big gap you saw?
I thought the biggest gap was that it wasn't capturing that we now produce other people's shows for them. It was more focused on kind of the fundamentals of the McCord list, which made me think, I wonder if I need to put in some more SEO data on the back end with our metadata to really tell the story better so that the first thing you hear, because, it's like if you don't tell someone your story, someone else will. So it's very important, I think, right out of the gate that it's very clear what we do clearly. So that was probably the part that I was like, I wonder if that's a gap on my side. So I'm literally, I had my team was on a call this morning talking about, hey, like what do we need to do when it comes to our website to just be more informative? So it gave me a lot to do and I'm excited about it.
And that's great. So it validated, it revealed some gaps. And was there any part in it that inspired you with a new way to think about telling your story?
Yes, what I loved the most, to be honest, was I loved the fact that it existed. And what I mean by that is, like I said, sometimes you get so buried in your brand and your message or your own website, and you're seeing it from the perspective that you already know what you do, right? It's almost like client ease. You're speaking in a language that's specifically for you and your people. But like when you actually pivot around and you start really thinking, like, what am I being seen as? How am I being interpreted into the world? That's probably my favorite thing about it was that it actually, I think the format of having a document like that really empowers people to know. We do a similar thing when we do in a show accelerator when we're launching a new show. I spend an hour with each of my show hosts and just really bake out like, hey, what is your message? What's your business model? What do you do? How do you make money at this? Like, how do we fit all this together? And then we give them a brand summary, like a brand positioning doc, basically. And so I really loved how this was doing it, probably a lot easier than I've been doing it. I was like, wait, I need to know this
I was going
genie.
to say, Rachel, you can become a user and you can put all of your people coming on through it. It's a perfect use for that, because then, if they've got a website up or they've got some written documents or they've written a book or whatever, you just feed it to the genie. The genie doesn't ask you a bunch of questions that you're not sure the answers are. It reveals how you are currently showing up. Think of it like this, Rachel. It's mirror, mirror on the wall. How is my brand showing up for all? And then you got to decide if you got too many warts in that reflection and where you're going to fix it, or, and yes, you could absolutely use it for your customers. And then once you've built the brand brain inside the genie, then you can create all of your strategy, your influencer campaigns, and all of your content through the genie. And it's always going to be on brand because you worked with it, collaborated with it. So it gets to know you better than you know yourself in some cases.
That is incredible. I love it. Yeah, we're gonna need to talk about that. Okay.
Well, good. Well, I'm really glad you liked it. Would love to see you all, put it in play there, so you could be helping your clients have even a bigger impact in the world. And finally, you've got a giveaway for our listeners.
I do. I do. So much like your incredible genie, I feel like audits and analysis are so helpful for us learning our brands. So one of our companies that we have is called Viral Brand. And it's the company I mentioned earlier with my husband, where he's launched all the movies and TV shows you love. Go check it out. It's super fun. We actually had 3 of the top #1 shows on Amazon a month ago. So that was pretty cool. So what we're
Congratulations. That is
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you so much. So we built this big audience of 1 million vetted creators who we connect with brands. And part of that is that we do a social media analysis for all of our new clients. So we basically look at, how are you showing up in social media? Who are your most notable followers? It's how I found out Paris Hilton followed me actually on social media. So it actually is a really cool tool. It's a multi-page report that we can just put in your social media handle on Instagram and really just read how you're appearing in that space. So it's helpful because I think, if you see one buzzword like soccer and you're like, oh my goodness, that's because I posted a picture of my kid playing soccer. You have to decide, is that part of your brand, or do we need to remove some to be more nail and head? So anybody who wants that, all you need to do is reach out to my team. You can just go to themccordlist.com and reach out to our team, and we will actually do that for you. Just give us your Instagram handle, and that's all we need, just your username, and we'll present it for you so that you can maybe do some learnings as well and add it to your genie situation.
That is awesome. And by the way, thank you so much for offering that up to our listeners. I don't know if you know or not, we also have a freebie on the Genie, and you can send any of your customers there. Just have them go and do the free brand assessment. All they do is put in their name, their email address, and their URL. That's all there is to it. And it's going to give them a 14-point assessment and a grade from A+ to F- on how well they're doing it. And it'll do it in about 1 minute, Rachel. So all of your customers, when you're getting to know them, you could run that through it first and get an idea of how they're showing up.
Let's go. That's amazing. You're gonna make my job so easy, dude. I'm gonna produce 40 shows now.
Well, there you go. It only took us 2 years to build the Genie, but precisely to help people like you do everything way faster, but always being on brand, so it's cool. But anyways, Rachel, thank you so much for being here. I just absolutely enjoyed your show, your story. Your energy is marvelous, and I can see why you are a big success at what you do and helping others tell their story through the McCord List.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm so honored. Bye, guys.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this edition of The Business of Story and sharing it with anyone you know who would benefit from Rachel's brilliant life storytelling advice. And if I can help you and your team grow as more confident, compelling, and really impactful storytellers, reach out to me at park@businessofstory.com. I do training virtually. I do it in person. And no matter what I do, I promise you that we will help your people excel through the stories they tell. And if you want your brand story to start excelling, then jump on over to StoryCycleGenie.ai. Now, I hope you'll join me next Monday when Joe Lazer's going to be here. He is the author of the new book, Super Skill: Why Storytelling is the Superpower of the AI Age. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Have a fantastic week, and I look forward to seeing you back here next Monday. Thanks for listening.